to help me along with it. Labour MP Jess Phillips joins us live on LBC. Jess, hello. Welcome along. Thank you for being here. There are many reasons why you've come in today, but one of them is to not talk about Brexit.
Yeah.
There are a couple of reasons why that would be the case, not least that we've got these 50 MPs from 7 parties who are forming a group to tackle the issues that are quote-unquote ignored by Brexit. And you are part of this more united group, right? You're somebody that says,
that's right,
we can put aside our political differences and we can come together to do what's in the national interest.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think I never get more reaction from the public, positive reaction, I should say, from the public than when you are willing to put aside some political differences to get an outcome. I didn't go to Westminster. Most politicians, in fact, I'd say it's a sort of 90-10 split. 90% of politicians go to Westminster to change something.
Yeah.
There is 10% who go for their own ends, and they're the ones we always end up talking about. But most politicians have an outcome, whether that's about education, whether it's about women's rights, whether it's about the health service, that drives them to bother getting to Westminster.
There's a whole gamut of stuff we can talk about, and I'm happy to be led, if you are too, by callers and what they want to discuss and what you see as the key issues this country has ahead of it outside of Brexit. And you can put your question to Jess about how best to try and tackle that. 0345 6060 973. You can watch us live on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. Basically, if you're on the internet, you can't miss this thing. Let's start with housing, because Labour have been out today talking about it, and the idea of scrapping a government scheme that allows offices and industrial buildings to be converted into homes without planning permission. Basically, as the Shadow Housing Minister John Healey suggests, is it turns into slum housing and rabbit hutch flats. Tell us what exactly this problem is and why it's being allowed to happen.
Well, the government has put in place a huge number of targets, and every government puts itself forward for going to be the biggest house builders of a generation, and almost always fails. But one of the ways that seems to be done to duke the stats in this instance is that instead of building new homes, decent homes, that if you start by building a brand new home, you have to build it to certain standards, has to have a certain amount of outdoor space, has to have a certain amount of space within the house, a certain number of access points, all that sort of thing, that just a decent home, what a child might draw if they were drawing a picture of a house. But actually, one of the ways around this for developers is to buy a big disused office building. I'd say it's probably largely much more of an issue in the south, in the southeast anyway.
Where space is tight.
Where space is tight. And to put in a load of really, really small flats and then get the government approved funding for the schemes that they've put in place for new house building. So it's basically developers getting away around the system, knocking out tiny units for high prices, especially in the southeast, but not providing decent homes.
So there should be a limit on, or an agreement on, how small is too small for a flat or for a house.
Absolutely.
Right?
I suppose what I would say, and I'm sure what the Labour Party is saying, is this isn't about saying you can't turn your nice disused industrial estate into fancy flats. That not at all. This isn't about not using those buildings. It is about using those buildings, but to the same standards of living that you would expect from any newly built property.
That's quite hard to define, though, isn't it? How small is too small? If you're going to set a limit on this house is literally too small for habitation, that's probably going to cut down the number of new dwellings that one can build.
Of course it is, but at the end of the day, you've got to have some sort of standards. I mean, I meet people who are living, 4 people in a tiny room because of the circumstances that they have been in, and I think that it seems like something that people like me say, but I have watched the effect it has on people's mental health, the children's effect, the effect it has on children being able to develop and play and do homework and live their lives and have privacy. That it's, I suppose, bread and roses from the Labour Party's point of view. There's nothing too good for the working classes, and we should expect them to live in decent homes.
And particularly affordable ones. And indeed, the Labour Party say its policy will be to build 250,000 new homes a year in England, with 100,000 being, quote-unquote, genuinely affordable? What does that mean to you?
At the moment, I think in London the affordable home standard is £400,000. It is totally ridiculous. And even in Birmingham, where house prices, the average house price in my constituency is less than £200,000. So having a sort of national affordable home standard is never going to work because London skews the figures so badly. But the idea in my constituency that you have to build some affordable homes always means that developers always do the absolute bare minimum of affordable homes that they can get through and then build bigger, fancier homes that people, which I understand people want to buy, but we have a housing shortage, and so we need a national solution for that.
And that would mean getting developers to build a set number of quote-unquote affordable homes, and whatever that figure might be depending on where you are.
I think you have to have regional standards for what that figure is because of wage differences as well as cost of living differences.
I suspect housing might be one of the things that outside of Brexit is being ignored, quote-unquote, or at least MPs think is being ignored. And I suspect we'll get calls on that throughout the hour. 0345 6060 973 is the number. Let's come on to this more united group then. It's a story in many of the newspapers today. More than 50 MPs, 7 parties, forming a group to tackle issues ignored because of Brexit. They say they've had some success thus far already on Tier 2 visas and access to legal aid and things like that. But now, clearly, being led by Nicky Morgan of the Conservative Party, Joe Swinson in the Lib Dems, a bit more of a formalising of a group that can come together to actually, quote-unquote, deliver. I could be being really cynical here, and I'm going to be. Isn't it a bit kumbaya to think that politicians can really put all political differences aside to deliver on a whole slew of different issues over which they will have political differences?
I think that in any other political era it would be absolutely kumbaya, but there has been a shift since we have been in a hung parliament. That means that everybody, actually, Theresa May has almost as much power as I do as an individual backbencher, which is mainly because she's got no power. It's not that I've got loads. But there has been this, everybody is basically a freelancer in a hung parliament, and if you want something to get through, especially if you're on the government benches or allied to somebody on the government benches, the government just basically want you to shut up and go away and do what they say on Brexit, so you can bend their will on other things that they think will go unnoticed.
And that is, it's a pressure group in a sense. It's a way of leveraging the fact that this is a hung parliament. You've all got equal amounts of power, arguably, in various areas.
Absolutely.
And you're going to try and make the most of it, which sort of seems fair enough. Whether it will work, we'll have to wait and see. Just before we get some callers on, there are a whole range of issues that are ignored. What are your sort of top 3 big challenges that this country faces that aren't being dealt with?
I mean, the single biggest thing would be housing, I would say. In my constituency, that is the main problem that people come in. I mean, homelessness is huge. And I don't just mean street homelessness, which gets a huge amount of coverage, actually, still, even throughout Brexit, although that coverage will wane in the summer. People are much more sympathetic in the winter. But actual people who are homeless at home, people who are living in bedsits, people who are living in completely inappropriate accommodation, and just the need for more housing is one of the biggest ones. School funding cuts, I would say, is the next biggest issue. That in peacetime, as it were, it would be wall to wall on the news, the fact that hundreds of schools can no longer stay open for 5 days a week, that the reduction in the number of teachers, it would be like every day Theresa May would be having that hammered at her. And then today, in fact, what will be discussed in Parliament is the general degradation of local services. So whether it's your youth services shutting down, your libraries closing, there has been a sort of hollowing out that been happening for 10 years. And actually people could tolerate it for this period, but now we're seeing the very worst ravages of that.
I suspect there will be more issues than that put to you. 0345 6060 973 if you're bored of Brexit, and my word, I think a lot of people are. This is the hour for you. If you think that there are other issues this country needs to be dealing with that Brexit has meant that it hasn't done, what are they, and how best do you think a group of MPs from across politics can come together to do that? Or is it fair to be pretty cynical about their abilities to do so? 0345 6060973. You can text 84850, tweet at LBC. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. We're all over the place, basically. Jess Phillips taking your calls with me, Tom Swarbrick, here on LBC. Your calls to come. It's 1:17.
This is LBC.
Reasons to be cheerful. 1, 2, 3.
If you've got BT Broadband, BT Mobile have something just for you. You and everyone you live with get an exclusive £5 off our mobile plans every month. Of course, if you're not with BT, you might be wishing you were. BT Mobile gives back more.
Reasons to be cheerful. 1, 2, 3.
BT. Be there.
Discounted price for BT Broadband Homes excludes business.
Imagination is a wonderful thing. It can take you anywhere, to the beauty of the Baltic or the wildlands of Alaska. From the northern lights of Iceland to New Zealand's lush South Island. Imagination lets you dance in Buenos Aires, dine in Barbados, discover ancient Rome, indulge in new delights. Imagination can take you anywhere, but a voyage with Cunard will take you there for real. Enjoy a little extra with complimentary money to spend on board from Cunard. Conditions apply. Atoll protected.
Psst! Did you know that Pimlico Plumbers have an utterly fabulous 24-hour service for plumbing, heating, drains, roofing, electrics, appliances, carpentry and building? Whatever your predicament, Pimlico Plumbers can send a friendly face to your door within the hour. Shh! And just between us, their work even comes with a 12-month guarantee. They aren't just any old tradesmen, they're Pimlico Plumbers, and they're always available on 0207 928 8888 or at pimlicoplumbers.com.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it, and I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Come along to the London Train to Teach event on the 27th of April. To register, search Get Into Teaching.
Have you ever bought an investment sold by Barclays, Halifax, Lloyds, Santander or any other bank or financial advisor? Investments like stocks and shares ISAs, investment bonds and certain types of pension can be risky. If you lost money with one of these investments, you could be owed thousands of pounds in compensation. Even if you no longer have the investment or the paperwork, here at Goodwin Barrett we can still help. To start your free assessment with Goodwin Barrett, text GOOD to 60777. That's GOOD to 60777. Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
What are the key issues in this country that are currently being ignored by Brexit, and how best can the political parties put aside their political differences to help solve them? 0345 6060973. Joined live in the studio for an hour by the Labour MP Jess Phillips, who is here to take your calls as well. Let's come to them. Simon is in Chelsea to kick us off. Hi, Simon.
Hi, good afternoon, Tom. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Jess.
Hiya.
Basically, my simple question is, what are we going to do about homelessness? Because, I went... what are we going to do about homelessness? Because it's one of the biggest plights that we're facing at the moment. And I will come back with a bit more information in a second. But what's Labour going to do about homelessness?
Personally, as somebody who ran a homelessness charity for many, many years, there are things that I would do about homelessness. For a start off, what we have to make sure is that there is proper prevention services in for those who end up street homeless. So there needs to be proper drug and alcohol services, mental health services. There needs to be proper throughput from people leaving prison, people leaving the armed forces. There is some really, really obvious trends in street homelessness that actually, with will and cash is the truth. With will and cash, you can interrupt them. There will always be people that you cannot get off the streets, but actually we shouldn't focus on that. The difficult cases make bad laws, but with regard to other issues around the homelessness that I see presented every day, is what we need is really decent temporary accommodation. At the moment, the temporary accommodation offer, where people have to go, is, I wouldn't put a dog in half the places my constituents end up. I had a terrible incident in my constituency recently where people were put in a travel lodge that was right next to the NEC in Birmingham, and because Crufts came and they got, I think it was like they got an extra tenner for the dogs, the families were moved out in honour of a miniature schnauzer.
To take the dogs in.
To take the dogs in.
So Jackson could get a bed for them.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, since 2016, there's been a 169% increase in homelessness since 2016. And I went to, I went back. I mean, I've just recently moved to Chelsea, and I'm not sort of bragging, but I've worked, I lived on the streets myself for 4 years in and around Victoria. And one of my biggest gripes at the moment is that when I'm in and around Victoria and I walk, and I do sometimes walk past just to take a memory and just to think where I've come from to where I am now, you've got a building sitting in Castle Lane that could house 200 homeless people, and it's been sitting there for years, dormant, doing nothing, just sitting there. But I think it's because it doesn't fit in with sort of Westminster and the tourism. But that Victoria Look Ahead Hostel was doing amazing work with some people. They were getting people off crack, heroin.
Yeah.
They had what was it, sort of like a rehab wing in the hostel, and you had to abide by the rules. And if you didn't, then there was consequences. And
well-managed homelessness services do not need to be a blight on the landscape. What we have at a problem at the moment is that sort of rogue landlords will realise that they can get, instead of £50 a week rent, they can get £180 a week rent if they say that they're housing vulnerable people through very, very technical issues to do with homelessness law that I won't bore you with now. But and so they will just set up houses in multiple occupation, put a load of people in without any proper support, and then neighbourhoods hate those places, understandably. Whereas I ran a vulnerable people service where people had drug and alcohol misuse problems, people had very, very severe vulnerabilities, but if they are staffed 24 hours, managed properly, there's no reason. And actually some of these office buildings that the Labour Party is talking out against turning into affordable homes today, actually turning those into really decent temporary accommodation or supported living accommodation is not a bad idea.
But when, Simon, I'm grateful, when a Conservative MP comes to you and says, Jess, help me, I want to sort out the problem of homelessness, the narrative is that the Labour Party would say, well, it's the Conservative Party that have helped lead to this rise in of homelessness. Are you able, as an MP, to put that aside in order to try and find a solution to it?
Absolutely. I will dance with the devil to make women and children safer, is what I always say. And actually, there are some really, really easy and obvious things that the government could do, and that is controlled by national government. So if Nicky Morgan or Nick Bowles in one instance came and talked to me about the ability for councils to build council housing, and we did we had conversations about how we were going to push the government on that, I would absolutely be willing to give them. I don't want the credit for knowing more about homelessness than they do. I want there to be less homeless people. The outcome is what matters.
We'll come on to more calls in housing in a minute. Just to satisfy my own intrigue, have you seen the Ed Stafford programme about homelessness on Channel 4?
Oh, no.
It's really interesting. He spends 60 nights sleeping rough on the streets, and he comes away...
Oh, my husband was watching it the other night.
He comes away with this really, I think, interesting impression of homelessness, particularly in London, where he says basically too many people are too generous and help people fund the lifestyle of drug abuse, drug addiction, and being able to get enough food in their belly to be able to sleep rough, which I thought was an interesting take on it.
Yeah, I mean, whether people are too generous, I mean, in London, maybe, but the root problem is that there needs to be somewhere, a better option for those people, and it's on us as policymakers to provide a better option. My brother was street homeless, and I can't say that he had a particularly nice life.
Your brother was?
Yeah, for many years. My brother is now an ex-heroin and crack addict, and he slept on the streets, he sofa surfed for a number of years. Yeah.
So that informs part of why you're so passionate about it. Let's stick on the housing theme. Brian is in Bexley. Hi, Brian.
Hi, good afternoon to you. Brian speaking.
Fire away with your question, Brian.
Well, years ago I used to be in favour of social housing, but of late I don't think it's a good idea. I do a lot of voluntary work. It's unpaid. It means I call on lots of areas. Okay, and so I live in Bletchley and Milton Keynes. And there are whole vast areas where there is social housing. And basically, as you know, Milton Keynes is quite a new area. Most of it is trashed, and you've got areas where there's mixed private and mixed social. And you can always tell which are the social ones. The gardens are overgrown, the letterbox flaps are missing, the doorbells are hanging off.
So you're saying people who are in social accommodation have no pride whatsoever about the house in which they live, no?
Well, when you call on these doors, they're all still getting up at 10 o'clock in the day. And like I said, it used to be a good idea, but not anymore. I mean, in Spain, they do a similar thing, but there, part of their tendency is they must keep the standard of the property, otherwise out, but they don't do that here.
It's the responsibility of the local council, for a start off, to make sure that the houses are in repair. And if you were to come and sit in my office for even an afternoon, you would hear about 10 different people come in and say that they had been complaining to the local council because there was something wrong with a gate or a fence. There are, almost all of my family before my generation lived in council housing. My husband was born in a council house. My husband didn't change his attitude the second he moved out of a council house. I mean, the man fixes everything as soon as anything is broken, as do his parents. The idea that all people who live in council houses are the same is the same as rich people being the same.
Brian, do you know anyone who lives in social housing?
I know a few, yes I do.
And are they
slovenly beasts?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Are they slovenly?
Yes and no. How can I put it?
Are you good friends with them, Brian?
They're not the same sort of standard where you've got areas in Milton Keynes where it's all privately owned. They're not of that ilk at all. And all the houses, even though they've got neighbours who have got privately owned either side, those are nice, but the one in the middle that's social, no, it's trash. The gardens are never looked after, and some of these are not even 10 years old.
Why do you think it is that they trash their houses? Is it they're fundamentally worse people?
I think what it is, I think because it belongs to somebody else, not their own, it's somebody else's problem, really. And it's really deplorable, because some of these places they've been given, particularly in areas like Fuller Slate, these are brand new houses when they got them, long driveways, and yet what you're seeing now is half a garage there, or last year's leaves, or the years before that, and leaves before that, and all the tourist stuff mixing in. Never sweat and dog
you never see my house, Brian. There's a pallet on the front at the moment and a load of old pipes, and I have to say I do own it, but my neighbours almost certainly think I'm very slovenly.
I think Brian is going to take that opinion of you too, Jess. We live in a mixed area of private and social, and the social housings are new and they look amazing.
Yeah,
I don't know where that attitude comes from. To be honest. I think it's particularly helpful.
Of course, in all estates or in all streets, on every street, in fact, even on the fanciest street, there'll be one house that is a little bit like rough and ready, and you want to offer to do the gardening for them, but you don't want to be rude. But there is a definite problem. It would be wrong to say that big estates of social housing where people feel forgotten and there is worklessness, that they can seem as if they are run down, but it is all part of a cyclical problem. The ones where the community are really activated and are working on the local parks in the area or doing stuff together are absolutely lovely. We've got to make sure that we help people to help their areas.
Brian, thank you. I think 0345 6060 973 is the number. Talked a lot about housing, plenty of other challenges for this country to overcome if it's possible. Those areas that are being ignored by Brexit, we'll come on to more of those in a few minutes' time. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick, Jess Phillips in the studio with us for an hour, taking your calls 0345 6060 973. More of them in a few moments' time. Let's get your news headlines though. 1:31, here's Thomas Watts.
A funeral is taking place in Belfast for journalist Lyra McKee, who was shot dead while covering riots in Londonderry. Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn are among the senior politicians attending the service. The government has reportedly approved the involvement of the Chinese technology firm Huawei in building Britain's new 5G network. There have been warnings Huawei could be compelled to provide sensitive information to the Chinese government. The Defence Secretary and National Police Chief in Sri Lanka have been told to stand down by the country's president. Ministers have admitted security forces failed to act on warnings before the attacks, in which 359 people were killed. LBC weather: heavy and thundery downpours gradually moving north, brighter and showery conditions following from the south, a high of 20 degrees.
Head to lbc.co.uk for the chance to win an iPhone 10 and a subscription to the new HiveLink Smart Service, which provides peace of mind to family members of elderly and vulnerable people as they go about their day. It's all thanks to Hive, so head to lbc.co.uk to find out more. I'm Tom Swarbrick. You're listening to LBC. It's 1:32.
This is LBC.
My new Vauxhall Grandland X. An SUV that's grand in style, grand in space, grand in comfort, and grand on the latest technology. And if that wasn't enough, it also comes with a pretty grand finance package too. 0% finance and no deposit. To find out more about their large SUV, search Grandland X offers. Vauxhall Grandland X. Keeps calm, carries on. Vauxhall, British brand since 1903. Conditional sales subject to status, T's and C's apply. 18 plus Vauxhall Finance.
For the latest travel news, go to lbc.co.uk.
When it comes to making a PPI claim, you can either do all the work yourself by complaining directly to your lender or the Financial Ombudsman for free, or you can contact the claims guys and get them to do all the donkey work for you. So if you don't have the time or the paperwork, or you're not certain you have PPI, make sure you beat the deadline on the 29th of August 2019 for making new claims by contacting the claims guys. Text ANSWER to 66777. Text ANSWER to 66777 now.
The claims guys.
Good afternoon. Can I interest you in changing energy supplier?
Do you do 100% renewable electricity?
No, but...
Can I control my heating with an app? Anytime, anywhere?
Well...
How about a rewards programme?
You get all that? Who with?
Shell Energy. Maybe you should switch energy supplier.
Where does your home energy come from? Search Shell Energy and see what you could get when you switch. Shell Energy. Home energy matters. Terms and conditions apply. Visit shellenergy.co.uk.
It can be tough, and things don't always go to plan. But you wouldn't have it any other way. Because running your business is your passion. And with a ton of payload and a DAB radio, the Renault Traffic is one thing off your mind. Now from $199 per month. Business users only. Prices exclude 20% VAT. Finance provided by Renault Finance. Offer based on Renault Traffic Business on contract hire. Initial payment of 2388 followed by 47 monthly payments of 199. Subject to status. 18 plus. Order by 1st of July and register by 30th of September. T's and C's apply. Participating dealers search Renault Traffic.
To find the truth, you wouldn't listen to just one voice. You wouldn't believe just one story. Or trust just one opinion. And neither would we. The Week magazine reviews all the issues of our day and where everyone stands on them. Sign up online and try 6 issues for free. Search The Week magazine today. After all, you shouldn't make up your mind on just one issue. Cancel anytime during the free period or continue with 13 issues for just £40.49.
This summer, upgrade your British staycation with Royal Caribbean. Swap grey skies for bright blue sea. Swap muddy boots for scuba suits. Swap soggy lunches for balcony brunches. Drive to Southampton and set sail to Europe from just $5.99 per person. Book now at royalcaribbean.co.uk or visit your local travel agent. Royal Caribbean. This is how to holiday. Price subject to availability on selected sailings. T's and C's apply. At or protected.
Are you aged 40 to 70 and in good health? Then you could be paid to take part in a new research study at King's College London, looking at the effects of aronia berries on blood pressure. To find out more, visit abpstudy.com. That's abpstudy.com.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with Tom Swarbrick.
Loads of people getting in touch. I think clearly people are spilling out over the top at realising that they don't have to talk about Brexit and can talk about everything else. Jess Phillips taking your calls for an hour here on LBC. Let's come to Richard in Bristol. Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jess.
Hiya.
It's an issue that transcends party politics and has been in the news lately. And it's basically the protests on Extinction Rebellion on the environment. And I'm just concerned that Labour has been quite muted as far as I can see, keeping an eye on the media, especially considering the party released its environment policy last September. Would you like to perhaps say why this might be so?
It's worth asking, do you support what Extinction Rebellion is doing?
To be honest, yeah, I do. Whilst I think I can understand the arguments about it stopping people going about their business. I mean, it's been stopping people going about their business in London, so obviously I've had no complaints about it in Birmingham. And if I were to be completely honest about Extinction Rebellion, I'd never heard of it until they broke into Parliament. Well, didn't break in, actually. They came in completely legally. I don't wish to libel Extinction Rebellion.
But they broke out of their clothing.
They broke out of their clothing in Parliament. So and that was my first instance. And what I would say the reason I support direct action when you feel like no one is listening to you. And I think that over the environment issue, for so long, it has been the sort of like throwaway line at the bottom of somebody's manifesto, or, you know, David Cameron with his Huskies, or Jeremy Corbyn will come out and say, yes, we're going to be greener than anyone else. They all say they're going to be greener. And it's really annoying when that doesn't actually seem to come to any direct action. So I can understand why taking direct action has actually put this at the top of the news for the last 2 weeks. And so in that, I can only take my hat off to them. However, I do think that their reach, and what I would, if I were to suggest something to them, it needs to be more outside of London, because it's certainly, aside from in the posher areas in Birmingham where quite a lot of the kids went on the strike, my son included went on the climate strike twice, it's not really, I wouldn't say that it's taking hold elsewhere.
Do you not think, though, that it's all very well to jump up and down and make your voice heard, but when people ask you, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
The response, and having interviewed a lot of people from Extinction Rebellion over the last few days, there isn't a clear response as to exactly what action needs to be taken and by when in order to help solve this problem.
And I think that any good campaigner, somebody who has taken direct action myself, who has been campaigning my whole life, the key thing is to have specific asks, and also to come up and be part of forming the solution yourself.
Because it sounds at the moment, a lot of people, sorry to interrupt, Richard, I know you're dying to come back in, I will let you back in, but a lot of people will see what Extinction Rebellion are doing and say, basically, they're holding politicians, and to an extent the capital, to ransom here. There are lots of things like, oh, well, we want them to declare a climate change emergency. What does that actually do?
Yeah.
What does it achieve?
Well, that won't actually achieve anything.
Won't do anything.
Yeah, if we declare an emergency, unless the government declared an emergency in the manner that they declare emergency about anything, have a Cobra meeting, set up a proper task and finish group that has specific targets to be working towards. I heard some of the talk about the idea of citizens' assemblies with some of these people, and also I think that the citizens' assembly idea that Extinction Rebellion I think have been pushing is a good one, and could be used to do some of the stuff about talking to people in Birmingham. For example, you know, huge numbers of my constituents work in the car industry, and I feel that whilst it's always the excuse is jobs and the economy is not to do anything green, and that is stupid. It's a stupid excuse, and we've got to embrace the future. I think those voices do need to be heard in it as well.
And the best way of going and getting those voices heard is, to your mind, direct action. That's fine. Blocking Oxford Circus, Piccadilly Circus.
Hasn't it? It's worked that we're talking about it. I would never talk about it. Literally, it's probably the first time in my entire political career I've ever been asked about green issues.
But doesn't that say something about the politics rather than the people?
Almost certainly. And you know, I'm not saying that we should have violent actions, but you know, as citizens, sometimes you do just feel like nobody is listening to you. I find it very difficult to have gone from being a citizen to being the establishment, because I now constantly talk about like I'm one of the citizens, and I get really like, actually, when they in the big house won't listen to you, and then my husband's like, you're in the big house, you know, Bab.
And talking of being listened to, we hear that protesters are weighing up meeting Michael Gove.
Yes.
Do you think the government should be engaging with these protesters? Do you think that they should be hearing their demands, or does that set a slightly dangerous precedent by saying, well, if you jump up and down and scream and shout loudly enough, you'll get your way with ministers?
That's a precedent that's been set by the European research creep. It's been a precedent that's been set. I think that precedent is well and truly there.
Not to their liking from the ERG.
The union movement, the women's rights movement, you get your voice heard by taking action, and as long as that is non-violent and consensual, I think it's fair enough. I think it's not like they are fraternising with terrorists. They're activists.
And just before I go on to Paul, what do you make of Theresa May not meeting with Greta Thunberg yesterday, the 16-year-old?
It is a missed opportunity. Was there an excuse given?
I'm not quite sure what the excuse was. Probably cabinet.
I think that actually Theresa May could do with a little bit of a bump in her PR, and could have been given the opportunity really to meet with Greta and look like she was interested in something other than Brexit. So it's a massive missed opportunity. But Theresa May is really good at one thing, and that is missing opportunities.
Richard, I'm grateful for the call. Let's go to Twickenham, to Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hi. Just a quick question to put to Jess. Jess, it goes without saying that abuse of MPs is totally out of order, should be sanctioned, tackled. Do you think, Jess, that you've talked about not being listened to, do you think that the fact that a lot of MPs in the House are saying, despite the Brexit decision, my constituents didn't vote to be poorer, or I think my constituency would be better off remaining in the EU, do you think that might contribute towards the atmosphere where people feel they're not being listened to? You know, in a nutshell, the EU referendum was a national decision, and then local MPs are saying, but not in Bognor, or not in Brighton, or not in Birmingham. Do you see what I'm getting at, Jess?
Yeah, I can totally see how some would feel that was people being ignored. And, you know, I'm willing to take that charge. I'm more than happy to take the charge that I may well disenfranchise and upset some of my constituents because of my position on certainly having a second referendum. And I'm okay with that, because that's part of our democracy, is that if you don't like what your politicians do, you have, you know, a mechanism to get rid of them. I could just listen directly to the numbers rather than to the people and the lives, and that would make me make a different decision. But I've never been a numbers woman. I've always been about people's lives, so I'm willing to live
and
with
the abuse.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the abuse, to be honest, never comes from my own constituents, ever. In fact, even though my constituency voted Leave by quite a big majority, they're never horrible to me, to be perfectly honest.
But you have suffered quite a lot of social media abuse that has then spilled over into
real
physical
life
threats.
Yeah, I have had huge amounts of abuse, and I think that we're living in a terribly feral time at the moment. I don't think politics. I think Ken Clarke and Margaret Beckett were saying recently, as people who've been politicians for over 30 years, that they've never known it be as dangerous to
Why?
be.
Is that just social media, or is it just access to people in your job?
Both. It is access. Previously, we were a little bit more in ivory towers, weren't we?
You want your ivory tower back?
No, I really don't want my ivory tower back. And every time I try and put in any sort of security, the only person who ever breaches it is me, because I can't live like that. I can't live to a schedule like that.
Do you mind me asking what security you've had to put in?
Well, we have security measures in my house, so we had to have all the locks redone. In my office, we have a panic room where
panic room.
Well, I mean. Please don't think that I'm like Jodie Foster and that it's really fancy. It's just a room with a reinforced door,
but that's terrifying.
A lock and a phone. That's all a panic
room. But that's
room
terrifying to have to set that up in your house.
Yeah,
and you've got young kids.
Yeah, I've got kids. Actually, my kids are the thing that bother me the most. Not just... It sounds awful. Generally. My kids are really annoying now. Yeah. But it bothers me that they ever put a threat. And in the early days of when the abuse first started, people would really go for the jugular and say, make threats against my children. And that was awful. But that doesn't happen quite so much now.
Did you ever think, this isn't worth it?
Unfortunately, I have never once thought this isn't... The abuse has never made me think this isn't worth it. The abuse makes me think, gosh, this is worth it.
Did your husband ever think this isn't worth it?
I mean, my husband barely even looks up from the newspaper to take note about what is going on. He keeps completely separate, actually. So he doesn't really know when loads of people are abusing me. My brothers, I've got 3 brothers, and they find it incredibly difficult. And they constantly read the below-the-line comments, which I've told them not to.
Because after a while, you cannot tolerate that. And after a while, there might be some of your colleagues in the Labour or the Conservative Party or elsewhere in politics who think, I can't do this anymore.
There will be. There will be some that walk away much more easily than they might have. And worse than that, though, is the people who won't put themselves forward, especially women of colour, especially, I think, would have to give it some really serious thought.
Would you encourage people a decade younger than you to go into politics now?
I mean, I absolutely would, and like I say, the abuse...
Really, even with the abuse and the
I absolutely
targeting?
Would, because actually the abuse and the targeting makes me realise that we desperately need decent people. If decent people don't go into it, you'll end up with, well, basically fascism will rise. If you give in to the bully, if you let their ridiculous threats and the violence and the racism, if you let it control you, you will end up controlled by violence. And that's absolutely not what I want.
0345 6060 973, the number to get your calls in. Only around 15 minutes or so left, so do keep those calls coming. 84850 to text. You can tweet at LBC as well and watch us live, Facebook, YouTube and on Twitter. Tom Swarbrick with Jess Phillips taking your calls for an hour here on LBC. It's 1:47.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Weekday mornings from 7. LBC.
Around 50 MPs forming a cross-party campaigning network to tackle issues they believe have been ignored due to Brexit. Liberal Democrat Deputy Leader Jo Swinson. What are some of these issues that have been ignored?
Issues like the urgent climate crisis, the poverty that many people are facing in this country.
Do you have Leavers and Remainers among your ranks?
This is not about Brexit. This is
No. But tell me one Leaver among your ranks.
I haven't done the analysis, but I do.
Well, I'll tell you, because I have. There are none.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Xero, get your business digital ready with Xero accounting software.
LBC.
The great British weather. One day you're cozying in with the family, the next you're chilling out in the garden. But whatever you're doing, Trusted Trader are always on hand to help. TrustedTrader.com have lots of really lovely tradespeople who are vetted, reviewed and reliable, unlike the weather. So for roofers who stop the rain coming in, gardeners for when the sun comes out, and other professionals in their trade, simply visit
TrustedTrader.com. If you get BT Superfast Fibre, you'll not only save £108, you'll also get a Google Home on us worth £129. Imagine that, working with a hub that's more powerful than other big providers. Superfast Fibre is $29.99 a month on an 18-month contract with a $9.99 delivery fee. Join by 25th of April to save £108 and get a Google Home. Search BT Broadband. BT, be there.
Prices may change. New customers to verify see bt.com/smarthub. 52.49 for month 19. Terms apply.
It's time to expand, and next door is available. But why are your plans waiting to get off the ground?
Whatever your business, our finance can keep things flowing. We are iWalker, and we offer loans from £1,000 to £200,000. iWalker. Search it how you say it. iWalker. Helping business flow.
Unlock the city with the new Range Rover Evoque. Know your side streets. From your inner city beats. Know your underbelly and where to fill your belly.
Your lamb, madam.
Know your north from your south. Live for the city with the new Range Rover Evoque. Land Rover, above and beyond.
We are working with partners to help
Londoners breathe cleaner air.
That's why we've installed
over 175 electric rapid charge points.
Some exclusively for taxis.
And others for rapid charging cars and vans.
Now that's a breath of fresh air
for everyone.
Search TfL improvements.
To the Mayor of London
and TfL.
Every journey matters.
Days and weeks can fly by, but if you're worried it's cancer, time can slow down and almost stop. That's why, with Bupa Health Insurance, you can call us about any symptom of cancer without seeing your GP first. Depending on your cover and your symptoms, we could even refer you to a consultant there and then. Bupa Health Insurance. For living. To find out more, search Bupa. Direct access services may not be available for some underwriting methods, and you may need to provide evidence the conditions are not pre-existing.
My borders are blooming, but there's not a bee in sight.
Want to get your flower beds buzzing? Get to B&Q. You can pick up 3 pots of lavender for just £15. It looks and smells lovely and attracts bees, so it's good for the planet too. You can do it when you B&Q it. Individual price £5.87, 17 centimetre pot.
Tom Swarbrick on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Jess Phillips is with us discussing anything but Brexit, really. Mark's in Tooting. Hi, Mark.
Yeah, hi. My question was to Jess. Do you regret taking a
such a tough stance towards Jeremy Corbyn in your early days, because effectively you alienated people like myself who, listening to you, I kind of really warmed to you and like what you speak. But I felt that the way that you behaved towards him kind of made me a little bit negative towards you, when listening to you now, I kind of would not have liked to have been.
You asking Jess to be more loyal?
Well, I would say loyal. Yeah, I mean, to some degree, yeah, but not so much loyal, just more so I just thought that her stance towards him was a little bit aggressive, and it kind of shadowed what she was about, and probably made a lot of people that could have warmed to her, which I am now.
That's
I just think that it kind of made me kind of a little bit anti-you when I didn't
let's get an answer from Jess, Mark. Let's see.
I think that on reflection, I wouldn't. I find it very difficult to say that I would change the way that I am, because I am the way I am, and I try and be as honest as I possibly can be. If I was to speak really frankly, and I have to say that quite a lot of my aggression, if as you have called it, towards Jeremy, comes from the fact that I spend, a good part of every single one of my days being told that I have to sort of do everything that I'm told by them, that I have to think a certain way, and I'm always, no matter what, going to kick off about that sort of thing. But if, I was elected and Jeremy Corbyn became the leader some 4 months after I was first elected, I was a brand new MP, and I felt that his very first action, that I'd ever known anything about him, I didn't know who he was before, I'd only been in Parliament for 3 months, his first action being one where he didn't put any of the women in his front bench. Unfortunately, that was, no matter if it had been Tony Blair who'd done it, if it had been Gordon Brown who'd done it, and certainly every time Theresa May does it, I was always going to speak up about that, and that's just a moral thing. But what I got back, instead of sort of solidarity from feminists or solidarity from the left, and actually I am much more left than people paint me out to be.
You're closer to Jeremy Corbyn's politics than you sometimes let on.
I am much closer to Jeremy Corbyn's politics than I think most people realise. People have to call me a Blairite or a centrist. I left the Labour Party under Tony Blair because of the Iraq War, for example, unlike Jeremy Corbyn. So some could say I'm even lefter. So the trouble is that I was saying something that I thought was a genuine and reasonable criticism to try and improve something as a feminist activist, and all I got back was, you only don't saying this because you don't like Jeremy Corbyn. It's like, no, it has nothing to do with it. I'm saying it because I don't like what he's done, and then immediately you end up in a ridiculous war of attrition. But of course, I think that, but on both sides, both from my point of view and the point of view of Jeremy and the people around him, we could all have behaved a bit better. So I'm willing to say that.
Because the as you say, the narrative around you is that you're a Blairite centrist that hates Jeremy Corbyn. So, but you would campaign for Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister?
Yes, I mean, I campaign for the Labour Party to lead the country,
regardless of who's in charge. You think he's fit to be Prime Minister?
The thing is, actually, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, is a perfectly reasonable human being. I worry about some of the people who he's got around him, advising him. No two ways about that. I think that they are sometimes reactionary. I think that they have views about, for example, the recent handling of the Assange situation. I found to be grotesque, as a feminist. So I think that it's some of the people around him, I would have some concerns, no two ways about it. I mean, I think Seamus Milner's been in the newspapers this morning, although I've not quite had time to pick up exactly what the detail on that was. But yeah, I think that there are some concerns about some of the people around him.
And unless he gets rid of those people around him or changes that mindset, would you be comfortable with him being Prime Minister?
No, I mean, I have to say, I would struggle if I thought that some of the people who seem incredibly friendly with Russia and completely and utterly one way about certain foreign affairs were still there. I would find that really difficult, and that is why I will always speak up, and that is why people think that I'm rude or I'm attacking Jeremy Corbyn, is I have genuine concerns and I want the Labour Party to be the best
and it's
thing.
Not disloyal to think that.
It's not, well, if it was disloyal, then Jeremy Corbyn has got every single battle medal.
Mark, thank you. Jill's in St Albans. Hi, Jill.
Hello, thank you for taking my call. I'm slightly coming in, I think, on something that you've just been discussing. I would vote Labour like a shot if Corbyn and his team were not there. And I just wonder whether you, Jess, and your fellow backbench MPs ever discuss what the situation could be like in terms of the polling and support if you had a different leader and a different leadership team.
Good question.
I mean, that is a good question. And of course, the answer is yes. Anyone who says that people don't discuss that sort of thing is lying. I mean, WhatsApp groups are plenty.
Yeah. You have discussed widely with your fellow backbench colleagues about ways of getting rid of Jeremy Corbyn.
No, I wouldn't say that we do. We definitely don't do that, actually, because in reality, when that was done, it horrendously backfires, and actually, I think made us all look terrible. So no, I wouldn't say that we sit around discussing how to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, but we talk about the polling, which was the question that the lady asked, whose name I've immediately forgotten. Jill, sorry about that, Jill. But
there are a lot of people like Jill. There are a lot of people who cannot hold their nose enough or for long enough to vote for a Labour led by Jeremy Corbyn. And you are appreciative of that, as you said.
Totally
you talk to colleagues about that. But the only other person that's going to become Prime Minister, a Labour leader who's going to become, is Jeremy Corbyn. So how do you get around that?
I mean, we live in a democracy, don't we? And if enough people feel the same way that Jill does, which is what Theresa May banked on in the last general election, and in reality, whether it's different this time, and I'm willing to, I'm actually not willing to make predictions, and I'm willing to think that it could be different this time when we next have a general election. Is that enough people last time said I couldn't, and said it to me on the doorstep, 25% going away rate of my Labour vote saying I don't like Jeremy Corbyn or I don't like the Labour Party in its current, the way it currently is, said they wouldn't vote Labour. But ultimately, when they went there, they didn't find an alternative, so they just voted the way that they always had.
It's not a great selling point.
Oh, no, I agree with you, but we live in a democracy, and if people like Jill and others can't vote Labour while Jeremy Corbyn is then we won't win an election, is the truth. And then democracy continues to spin us around on its crazy wheel.
Just before I let you go, whenever there is another general election, and it might be quite soon, do you think Jeremy Corbyn is going to become Prime Minister?
Well, under current polling, he certainly would be the leader of the largest party. Whether they'd be able to form some sort of a coalition. I think we are in for a very long time of hung parliaments, European-style coalitions that we're very new to. But yeah, I imagine that he will be the commander of the largest party.
And no chat between you and the Tigger Independent Change, whatever their name is now, barcode people. You've not been persuaded to go over and join the barcode people.
No, not at all.
Jess Phillips, I'm really grateful to you for coming in.
No,
do come in and see us
pleasure.
again. Thank you very much indeed. The Labour MP for Birmingham Yardley, Jess Phillips, taking your calls here on LBC.